The material submitted today is a script exploring the psychology and neuroscience behind why some people genuinely prefer solitude over socializing. And honestly, it's incredibly strong, deeply researched, and highly evocative. But to maximize the reader's experience, we need to apply three specific editorial lenses: angle and originality, structure and flow, and tone and style.
Yeah, because the goal here is to elevate the piece, taking it from being merely validating to truly transformative for the reader. The science in there, like the dopamine sensitivity, it's great, but the application is where we can really dig in.
Exactly. So let's jump right into that first lens, angle and originality. Relying exclusively on world-renowned geniuses to illustrate the biological benefits of solitude risks inadvertently alienating the everyday reader.
Oh, 100%.
The section detailing how the prefrontal cortex thrives in quiet environments is fascinating, but framing it entirely around Einstein's theory of relativity or Newton inventing calculus or, Maya Angelou and Tesla, it creates this unattainably high bar.
Right, it's almost like a trap. The weakness is that it risks making the reader feel like they have to be producing some world-changing invention just to justify staying home on a Friday night.
Yeah, like if I'm not writing a masterpiece, I shouldn't be alone.
Exactly. And that completely undercuts the text's core message, which is that everyday solitude is just a valid, normal operating system. The science itself is robust. The prefrontal cortex is the executive command center, and it requires so much cognitive bandwidth.
Right.
And when you're in a loud, social room, your brain is just hijacked by sensory processing. Tracking overlapping conversations, reading micro-expressions. So when you remove that noise, the default mode network, the part for deep internal reflection, can finally take over.
Which is brilliant. The mechanics are totally sound, but it's a bit like trying to sell the benefits of a daily fitness routine by only showing Olympic gold medalists.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right? The average person might just look at that and feel the logic absolutely does not apply to their morning jog around the block. So the suggestion here is to broaden the scope of the examples to demonstrate how this specific prefrontal cortex activity benefits ordinary people in their daily lives.
Yeah, placing them on the exact same spectrum of validity as the historical figures.
Exactly. So for some concrete example, and obviously there are a million ways the author could approach this, but you could demonstrate how this deep processing helps a public school teacher.
Oh yeah, like she's gardening alone and that quiet allows her brain to brainstorm a breakthrough lesson plan without the constant interruptions of a live classroom.
Yes. Or you could show a mechanic who is mentally mapping out a really complex engine problem during a quiet solo drive home.
That's a great one. The rhythmic hum of the road, the lack of conversation, that sensory deprivation lets his brain visualize the engine block and find the solution. Neither the teacher nor the mechanic is Einstein, but the biological mechanism is identical.
Totally. And the author can choose any everyday profession to contrast with the genius. It just reminds me of how we design acoustic spaces,
Oh, right, the recording studio versus the concert hall metaphor.
Yeah. If you build a concert hall, the walls catch every vibration to amplify the energy. But a recording studio has thick foam and air gaps to deliberately absorb the noise.
Because you want to isolate the purest recording of a single instrument.
Right, eliminating the echoes. Neither room is broken, they just process sound differently. And some brains are concert halls, and some are recording studios.
Exactly, which is such a validating concept for the reader. But that actually brings us to our second lens. Structure and flow. We're moving from how the reader views their own potential to how the text asks them to interrogate their deepest motivations.
Right. And here's the topic sentence for this one. The sudden pivot from validating the reader's biology to questioning their psychological motives creates a jarring emotional whiplash.
It really does, because the weakness here is that the first half of the material heavily validates the reader's unsociability. It does all this heavy lifting explaining the dopamine volume dials, assuring them, hey, you aren't broken.
Yeah, like an extroverted brain needs the volume at an 8, but the introverted brain is perfectly stimulated at a 3.
Exactly. It's a very comforting biological fact. But then, out of nowhere, the text abruptly halts, and it asks this deeply uncomfortable question based on Abraham Maslow's concepts.
It's so sudden.
It is. It asks, are you choosing solitude out of healthy abundance, or are you hiding out of unhealthy scarcity? And because this transition lacks a conceptual bridge, the sudden shift from deep validation to suddenly probing for trauma or fear, it feels slightly accusatory.
It feels like an ambush. You spend 10 minutes wrapping the reader in this warm, scientific blanket, telling them their brain is perfectly fine, and then you just rip the blanket off and go,
Wait, are you actually just hiding from the world?
Right. The concepts themselves are highly relevant. Maslow's theory about behaviors driven by scarcity versus abundance is totally valid here. But the text treats the biology and the psychology like they're two completely separate conversations.
So the suggestion here is to use the biological mechanisms that are already established earlier in the text, specifically the dopamine threshold, as an organic bridge into Maslow's psychological diagnostic.
Yeah, show how the biology actually informs the psychology.
So for a concrete example, you could introduce the transition by asking the reader to evaluate how their dopamine actually feels in real time.
Oh, I like that.
Like the author could write, when your dopamine threshold is maxed out at a loud party, retreating feels like taking a deep breath that's healthy abundant. But if you retreat before the music even starts playing because you are terrified of the crowd, that's scarce.
That is such a clean fix. It connects the volume dial metaphor directly to the concept of walls becoming prisons. Like, if you're turning down the volume to rest, the room is a sanctuary. If you're turning it down because you assume the outside world is a threat, the room becomes a cell.
Exactly. You're looking at the same behavior staying home, but diagnosing the internal mechanism. And speaking of diagnosing, I really have to push back on a specific tactic the text uses right at this transition.
Oh, the comment section thing?
Yes, the text actually says, type 1 in the comments if you choose solitude for abundant, type 0 if you're hiding. I mean, I have to question if this internet engagement tactic cheapens the profound psychological exploration of Maslow's theories that immediately...
It really does. It abruptly forces the reader out of this deep internal landscape. You're asking someone to reckon with their potential trauma or social anxiety, and then in the very next breath, asking them to hit a number on their keyboard to feed an algorithm?
It breaks the fourth wall in the absolute worst way. It turns a genuine moment of psychological reflection into just a cheap internet poll.
Yeah, they really need to cut that. The reader needs the space to process that diagnostic internally without performing it for an audience.
Totally. And that actually transitions us perfectly into our third lens, tone and style, because we're shifting from the reader's internal psychological state to how they communicate this state to the outside world.
Right.
Framing the conclusion as a defense mechanism against a judgmental society diminishes the empowering foundational message established earlier in the piece.
It really undermines it. The weakness in this ending section is that the text offers the reader scripts to defend their solitude.
Yeah, phrases like, you don't know them an explanation, or tell them about dopamine, or because I like myself.
And the text even brags that these responses tend to end the conversation. But that maintains this combative us versus them posture. And that defensiveness actively contradicts the research from Dr. Bella DiPaolo, which the author literally cited earlier in the text.
Right. Her research proves that people who thrive alone are actually better at relationships.
Exactly, because they're coming from a place of wholeness, not isolation. They aren't using social interactions to regulate their nervous systems. So offering them scripts designed to aggressively shut conversations down makes no logical sense.
Shutting someone down with a blunt remark is a trauma response. It just takes the reader straight back to that unhealthy scarcity model we were just warning them about.
Right.
If you're coming from a place of abundance, you don't need armor. So the suggestion here is to pivot the ending's tone from defensive justification to positive relationship integration. Show the reader how to use their healthy solitude to actually strengthen their bonds with others.
Yes, give them the tools to communicate from that place of wholeness.
So as a concrete example, instead of the confrontational, that tends to end the conversation approach, the text could offer phrasing that invites people in. Something like, I recharge best in quiet, so I'm taking tonight for myself, but I have so much energy for our lunch on Tuesday.
Oh, that's beautiful. It honors the biological boundary but prioritizes the ongoing connection.
Exact. Or another example would be setting a boundary that emphasizes the quality of presence the reader will bring after they recharge. This pays off that earlier point about not giving people scraps of energy.
Yeah, like saying, I want to be fully present when we hang out, so let me take the weekend to reset so I can give you my best self. That reflects a really confident relationship-building tone.
And it ties back perfectly to the text's brilliant inclusion of the Japanese concept of hitori.
Oh, right, the cultural celebration of doing things alone.
Yeah, hitori isn't about defending oneself against sideways glances. It isn't a shield. It's a celebrated, quiet confidence. And the ending of the script should mirror that exact cultural confidence. You don't need a defense attorney for your alone time.
Absolutely. If the tone shifts from combat to confident integration, the piece won't just tell the reader they aren't broken, it'll actually model how to thrive as a whole person in a noisy world.
Well said. All right, let's concisely recap the main points of our critique today. The material is incredibly strong, but it can be elevated by diversifying the examples beyond historical geniuses, smoothing the structural transition into Maslow's theories using the established biology, and shifting the final tone from defensive to integrated.
Right. And so quickly summarize the actionables for the author. Add everyday examples, like the teacher or mechanic, alongside Einstein. Blend the dopamine metaphor directly into the healthy versus unhealthy diagnostic, and rewrite those final scripts to reflect confident relationship building rather than self-defense.
Perfect. Thank you so much to the listener for submitting such a fascinating piece of work. Just gently reminding you that these notes are just a few ways to approach the review. We warmly invite you to submit your revised work back to the critique for another look.